It's funny, the things you remember. I can't tell you what I had for breakfast yesterday, but I can still feel the suffocating heat of that summer in 1973. I can smell the oversweet perfume of magnolias and the metallic tang of an approaching thunderstorm. And I can still see Laura Davey's smile, the one that always seemed to hold a secret you were dying to know. It's been 50 years. 50 years of whispers, theories, and the heavy silence that fell over our small North Carolina town whenever her name was mentioned. We all thought we knew the story. Or at least, we thought the story was over, buried under decades of new seasons and new sorrows. We were wrong. The story wasn't over. It was just waiting, and last Tuesday, it came for me. The knock on my door was too firm for a neighbor, too polite for a deliverman. I wasn't expecting anyone. At 71, my social calendar is what you'd call selective. It mostly consists of my dog, a worn-out armchair, and a never-ending argument with the squirrels over my bird feeder. I opened the door to find two people who were so spectacularly out of place they might as well have beamed down from a spaceship. A man and a woman, both dressed in immaculately pressed dark suits that screamed federal government. They were young, their faces smooth and earnest, a stark contrast to the weathered wood of my porch and the even more weathered map of my face. "Mr. Jack Caldwell?" the man asked, his voice flat, professional. "Depends on who's asking," I said, leaning against the doorframe. It's an old habit, a little bit of sass to test the waters. The woman offered a thin, practiced smile and held up a badge. FBI. My heart didn't race. It just stopped. For one solid second, the world went quiet. FBI agents don't show up in a town like ours unless something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Or terribly, terribly right. "My name is Agent Shaw. This is Agent Gallo," she said. "We'd like to ask you some questions about a cold case. The disappearance of Laura Davey." And there it was. The ghost at the feast. The name that hung in the air, like smoke from a fire long since extinguished. It wasn't a question. It was a summons. They weren't asking me about a case. They were asking me about a part of my own history, a chapter I thought was sealed shut. I stepped aside and gestured them in. My old hound Buster lifted his head from his rug, gave them a low grumble, then decided they weren't worth the effort and went back to sleep. I wish I had his instincts. My living room is filled with books and local history, the things a retired town historian collects. It's usually a cozy space, but with them in it, the room felt like an interrogation box. They sat on my sofa, perfectly postured, their eyes scanning everything. They weren't looking at my books. They were reading me. "We know this might be difficult, Mr. Caldwell," Agent Shaw began, her voice softening just a fraction. "It was a long time ago, but we have new information. The case has been solved." That sentence hit me harder than the badge. Solved. It wasn't a word I ever expected to hear associated with Laura Davey. Her story was our town's local legend, a piece of dark folklore. It was the reason kids didn't stay out after dark, the reason parents held their children a little tighter. It wasn't supposed to have an ending. Solved? I repeated, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. After 50 years? How? Agent Gallo, the man, leaned forward slightly. "We made an arrest this morning. A man named Thomas Abernathy. The arrest is causing some shock in the community." I felt the floor drop out from under me. Tommy Abernathy. Not just a name. He was the golden boy. Star quarterback, son of the wealthiest family in the county, the one who went on to become a state senator. He was the guy who organized the search parties for Laura, the one who gave a tearful speech at her memorial service. Tommy Abernathy wasn't just a pillar of the community. He was the goddamn foundation. The idea of him being involved was not just shocking, it was impossible. It was like saying the sun rises in the west. "That's absurd," I said, maybe a little too loud. "Tommy Abernathy? No. You've got the wrong man." "There's no way." Agent Shaw's eyes met mine, and there was no triumph in them, only a tired sort of resolve. "His DNA was a matched evidence found at the scene. It's him, Mr. Caldwell. We're here because his story, his confession, is complicated. He says he wasn't alone. And he mentioned you." I stared at them, my mind a whirlwind of dusty memories. That summer, the air thick with secrets. Laura. She was different, not like the other girls. She saw things. She talked about the woods behind her house, not as a place for kids to play, but as something ancient and awake. She drew strange symbols in her notebook, spirals and eye shapes, things she said she saw in the patterns of the leaves, in the cracks in the mud by the creek. She called him the Whispering Man, a figure she claimed to meet in the deepest part of the woods, a man who told her secrets about the stars and the earth. We all thought it was just her imagination, the games of a creative, lonely kid. "He mentioned me?" I finally managed to say. "Why in God's name would he mention me?" "He said you were there," Gallo stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "He said you saw what happened. He said you, of all people, would know why it had to be done." His gaze was unflinching. "He said you were the one who knew about the Whispering Man." "You think I knew about this?" I asked, the anger finally cutting through the shock. "If I knew who killed Laura, do you really think I would have sat on this porch for 50 years and let her rot in the ground while—" Tommy Abernathy shook hands and kissed babies. Agent Shaw held up a hand, a gesture meant to pacify. "We're not accusing you of the murder, Mr. Caldwell. But Abernathy claims that on the night Laura disappeared, you were in the woods. He says you were looking for her. And he says you found something else instead." I sank back into my chair, the worn leather groaning under my weight. 1973. I was 21 then, just back from a stint in the Navy that ended with a bad knee and a discharge paper I didn't want. I was angry at the world, drifting, working odd jobs at the lumber yard. Laura was 17. She was my neighbor, the kid sister I never had. I used to fix her bicycle chains and chase away the stray dogs that bothered her cats. I was looking for her, I admitted quietly, the memory surfacing like a buoy held under water for too long. Everyone was. Her mom called me around 10. Sighed Laura hadn't come home from her walk. I grabbed a flashlight and went out. But I didn't find anything. Just darkness. "Abernathy says you found the clearing," Gallo pressed. "The one with the stones?" A chill, colder than the grave, went up my spine. The clearing. I hadn't thought about that place in decades. I had forced myself not to. It was a circle of dead grass deep in the Blackwood, a patch of land where the trees refused to grow. We used to dare each other to camp there, but no one ever lasted the night. The air always felt too heavy, like the pressure before a storm that never breaks. "I walked near it," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but I didn't see anything. "Just shadows." "Tommy says he saw you there," Shaw said. "He says he was watching. He says you saw the light." I closed my eyes. The light. That's what Laura had talked about in the weeks before she vanished. Not sunlight or moonlight or the headlights of a car. She described it as a humming light, something that vibrated in your teeth. She said it came from the Whispering Man. I had dismissed it as nonsense, the product of a girl reading too many pulp sci-fi novels and spending too much time alone. "I didn't see any light," I lied. It was the same lie I'd told the sheriff in 73, the same lie I'd told myself until I almost believed it. But in the quiet of the night, when the wind howled through the pines, I knew better. I had seen something. A flash, a distortion in the air, like heat rising off asphalt, but at night. And for a split second, the trees hadn't looked like trees. They looked like bars of a cage. "Why is Abernathy talking now?" I asked, deflecting. "He's been silent for half a century. Why confess?" He didn't just confess, Gallo said, pulling a photo from a folder. He started drawing these. He placed the picture on the coffee table. It was a crude sketch, done in charcoal or pencil on the back of a legal pad. It showed a figure, tall and spindly, with limbs that were too long and too many joints. But it was the face that made my stomach turn. It had no eyes, just a single vertical slit where a mouth should be. And around it, drawn in frantic, jagged lines, were those symbols. The same ones Laura used to doodle in the margins of her school books, the spirals, the watching eyes. He says the whispering man made him do it, Shaw said, her voice devoid of skepticism, which frightened me more than if she had laughed. He says it demanded a trade, a life for knowledge, power. He says he gave Laura to it. He's pleading insanity, I scoffed, though my hands were trembling. It's a strategy. He's a politician. He knows how to spin a narrative. Maybe, Shaw conceded. But there's something else. When we found Laura's remains, they weren't in the ground, Mr. Caldwell. We found them inside a tree. A massive oak, hundreds of years old, that had fallen during the storm last week. Her body was fused with the wood, like she had grown into it, or the tree had grown around her in an instant. There were no tool marks, no signs of digging. It's biologically impossible. The room spun, fused with the tree. I remembered Laura telling me once, with that intense look in her eyes, that the trees in Blackwood weren't just plants. They're the fingers of the earth, she'd said. And sometimes they make a fist. We need you to come with us to the site, Gallo said, standing up. Abernathy is being transported there for a walkthrough. He refuses to speak to anyone else unless you are present. He says you're the only other witness to the arrival? Arrival? I asked, dread pooling in my gut. That's what he calls it, Gallo replied. The night the sky opened up, I didn't want to go. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stay in my armchair, to tell them to get lost, to let the past stay dead. But the image of Laura, trapped in wood for 50 years, silenced my fear. I owed her this. I owed her the truth I had been too cowardly to face back then. Let me get my coat, I said, standing up. My knees popped, a sound like dry twigs breaking. The ride to the woods was silent. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows across the road. As we turned onto the dirt track that led into the heart of Blackwood, the temperature dropped. It happens sometimes in these hills, pockets of cold air trapped in the valleys, but this felt unnatural. It felt like walking into a meat locker. We arrived at the clearing. Police tape fluttered in the wind, a stark yellow against the encroaching gray of the twilight. Floodlights were already set up, bathing the scene in harsh, artificial light. And there, in the center, was the fallen giant, the oak tree. It was split down the middle, revealing a hollow cavity that looked disturbingly like a womb. And standing near it, shackled and surrounded by guards, was Tommy Abernathy. He didn't look like the confident senator anymore. He looked like a husk. His hair was wild, his expensive suit rumpled and stained. But when he saw me, his eyes lit up with a terrifying recognition. "Jack," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You remember, don't you? You remember the sound." I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air here smelled wrong, not like pine and earth. It smelled like ozone and copper, like blood and lightning. "I remember you were a coward, Tommy," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "I remember you let everyone think she ran away. I couldn't stop it." He screamed, pulling against his chains. "It was hungry, Jack. It promised me everything. But it lied. It didn't leave. It's still here." Suddenly, the floodlights flickered. Once, twice, and then a sound began to rise from the woods. A low, thrumming vibration that I felt in my teeth before I heard it with my ears. It wasn't the wind. It was a hum. a mechanical, rhythmic hum that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The agents reached for their weapons. The guards around Tommy looked around nervously, but Tommy just started laughing. A high, frantic giggle that sounded like glass breaking. "It's waking up," he whispered. "Jack, look at the sky." I looked up. Above the tree line, where the first star should have been appearing, there was nothing but a void. A patch of sky where the light didn't reach. And in the center of that darkness, something was moving, something vast. And then I remembered the lie I told myself. I didn't just see a flash of light that night in 1973. I saw a shape, a metallic geometric shape that hovered silently over the clearing, defying gravity, defying logic. And I saw a beam of light, not pulling Lavra up, but pushing her into the earth. "God help us," I whispered. The hum grew louder, turning into a deafening roar. The ground beneath our feet began to tremble, and from the split trunk of the ancient oak, a mist began to seep out. It wasn't white fog. It was a shimmering, iridescent vapor that swirled with colors I couldn't name. "It remembers you, Jack." Tommy shrieked over the noise. "It remembers the witness." The agents didn't react to Tommy's screams about the witness. They were trained professionals, their faces masks of controlled indifference. But I saw the tightness around Agent Shaw's eyes, the way her hand hovered near her holster. They weren't scared of Tommy. They were scared of what he was saying. And standing there, with the hum vibrating in my chest like a second heartbeat, I was terrified that he was right. "Get him back in the vehicle," Agent Gallo barked, his voice tight. "Now!" The guards wrestled a laughing Tommy back toward the armored van. He didn't fight them, just let his body go limp, his eyes fixed on the darkening sky above the clearing. As the heavy doors slammed shut, silencing his mania, the hum in the air didn't stop. If anything, it changed pitch. It went lower, deeper, a sound you felt in your bowels rather than heard. "Mr. Caldwell," Shaw said, turning to me, "we need to leave. This area isn't stable." "Stable?" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You think this is an earthquake? Look at the tree, Agent Shaw. Really look at it." She hesitated, then turned her flashlight beam back to the split oak. In the stark white light, the anomaly was undeniable. The wood where Laura's body had been found wasn't rotted. It was fused. There was no seam where flesh ended and bark began. Her clothes, preserved perfectly in the resin-like sap, were merged with the grain of the wood. It looked less like a burial and more like a transformation. "I've seen crime scenes," Shaw whispered, her composure slipping. "I've seen things people do to each other. But this, biology doesn't work this way. Not here, it doesn't," I said. "Not in Blackwood." We drove back to town in silence, but the air inside the car felt pressurized. My mind was racing back to 1973, to the days leading up to the disappearance. I remembered the strange static on the radio that week, how every station seemed to be broadcasting the same low-frequency drone. I remembered the birds. Hundreds of them, dead on the lawns, their tiny bodies stiff, no marks on them. We blamed it on a pesticide leak from the nearby farm. That was easier than admitting the sky was killing them. When we got back to the station, they put me in a small conference room. It wasn't an interrogation room. There was coffee and donuts, the universal peace offering of law enforcement, but the door was locked. I wasn't a suspect, but I wasn't free either. About an hour later, Gallo came in. He looked shaken. He tossed a file onto the table and sat down heavily. "We found something else at Abernathy's property," he said, rubbing his temples. "In a safe behind a false wall in his basement. It's a journal. Laura's journal." My breath caught. We had looked for that journal everywhere. Lavra wrote in it religiously. If there were answers, they were in those pages. And I asked, "And it's difficult to read?" Gallo admitted. Not because of the handwriting, but because of what she describes. She talks about you, Jack, a lot. He slid the book across the table. It was a standard composition notebook, the cardboard cover faded and peeling. My hands shook as I opened it. The smell of old paper and lavender her scent wafted up, instantly transporting me back to her front porch swing. I turned to the last entry, dated August 14th, 1973, the day before she vanished. He is getting closer. The whispering man. I can hear him even when I'm awake now. He tells me the door is opening. He says the trees are the keys. Jack doesn't believe me. He tries to be brave, but I see the fear in his eyes when the wind blows. He thinks he can protect me with his flashlight and his skepticism. But you can't fight a storm with a matchstick. I have to go to the clearing, tonight. He promised that if I go, he will leave the others alone. He will leave Jack alone. I'm so scared, but I can't let them take him too. I stared at the words, the ink blurred by my own sudden tears. She went there to save me. She thought she was making a deal. She sacrificed herself, I whispered. She thought she was trading her life for mine, or she was lured, Gallo said gently, manipulated by a predator who used her fears against her. Abernathy knew about this obsession. He could have used it, but that doesn't explain the tree agent. I snapped, slamming the book shut. It doesn't explain the hum, or what we just saw in the woods. Gallo sighed, leaning back. We have a theory about the tree. There's a rare fungal infection that can cause rapid tissue calcification in plants. If she was placed inside a hollow, and the tree grew rapidly due to some environmental anomaly. Environmental anomaly? I interrupted. You mean like a UFO crashing? Or a portal opening? Because that's what Abernathy is talking about. We deal in facts, Mr. Caldwell, Gallo said, though his voice lacked conviction. Facts, evidence. Abernathy's DNA is on her clothes. He knew details only the killer would know. The rest. The lights, the hum. That's mass hysteria. Stress. Suggestion. Is it? I challenged. Then explain the tape. Gallo froze. What tape? The one you confiscated from Abernathy's safe. Don't tell me you didn't find it. Laura carried a small cassette recorder. She liked to capture bird calls. If she went to meet someone that night, she would have had it running. Gallo's face went pale. He glanced at the mirror on the wall, the one we both knew was one-way glass. He stood up abruptly. Wait here, he said, and left the room. He was gone for 20 minutes. When he returned, he wasn't alone. Agent Shaw was with him, and she was holding a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small black cassette tape. We haven't listened to it yet, Shaw said. We were waiting for the tech guys to digitize it, but given the circumstances, we think you should hear it first. If there's a voice on there, we need you to identify it. They brought in a small player. Shaw put the tape in with gloved hands. The click of the play button sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. At first, there was only static, the hiss of white noise, then the sound of crickets, footsteps crunching on dry leaves. Heavy breathing Laura's. She was running, or walking fast. I'm here, her voice whispered, tinny and small. I'm at the stone circle. Where are you? Silence. Then a rustling. Hello? Laura asked. And then a voice answered. But it wasn't Tommy Abernathy's voice. It wasn't any human voice I had ever heard. It sounded like grinding stones, like the earth itself trying to speak. It was a low, distorted rumble that didn't form words so much as push thoughts directly into your skull. Open, the voice groaned. Then a scream, Laura's scream. It was short, cut off abruptly by a sound that I can only describe as wet tearing. And then the hum began, the same hum we heard in the clearing tonight. It started low on the tape and rose in pitch until it was a shrieking whistle. But under the hum, there was another sound. A man's voice. Human. Terrified. Oh God, what is that? It's not a man. Tommy, run, run. My blood froze. That second voice, the one screaming at Tommy to run. It was me. I stared at the player, my heart hammering against my ribs. That was my voice. Unmistakable. But I wasn't there. I was in my bed, asleep, dreaming of falling. I had told the police that. I had told myself that. That's impossible, I stammered. I was home. I swear to God, I was home. Shaw looked at me, her expression unreadable. Were you Jack? Or is this the part of the memory you locked away? The part that explains why you've lived alone for 50 years, watching the woods? Before I could answer, the lights in the police station flickered. The hum, the real one, not the recording, vibrated through the floorboards. The coffee in my cup rippled. It's happening again, I whispered. Whatever happened that night, it's not finished. I sat in that chair, staring at the cassette player, feeling the blood drain from my face. The voice was mine. There was no mistaking the cadence, the pitch, the sheer terror. But the words. It's not a man. Tommy, run. I had never said those words. Not in this reality. Not in the memory I had guarded so carefully for 50 years. My memory was simple. I went to the woods. I saw nothing. I went home. I went to bed. I woke up to a town searching for a missing girl. It's a trick, I said, my voice shaking. Audio manipulation. AI. Deepfakes. You guys can do anything with computers now. Agent Shaw leaned forward, her eyes intense. Mr. Caldwell, this tape has been in a safe since 1973. The magnetic degradation is consistent with its age. The chemical composition of the tape stock is from that era. Unless Thomas Abernathy had a time machine and 21st century editing software in his basement in the 70s, this is real. Then how? I demanded, standing up and pacing the small room. How can I be on that tape, screaming at something I never saw? Trauma, Gallo suggested softly. Dissociative amnesia. The mind protects itself, Jack. You saw something so horrific that your brain just erased it. Rewrote the script to keep you sane. And what did I see, Agent Gallo? I spun on him. A monster? A ghost? Or did I see a U.S. senator sacrifice a teenage girl to a tree? Before he could answer, the door burst open. A uniformed officer stood there, his face pale and sweaty. You need to see this, he stammered. The sky, it's spreading. We rushed out of the room, through the bullpen where phones were ringing off the hook, and out the front doors of the station. The street was filled with people. They were all looking up, their faces illuminated by a strange, pulsating violet light. The void in the sky above Blackwood hadn't just stayed over the woods. It had expanded. It was now a massive, swirling vortex of clouds that looked like bruised skin. And from the center of it, beams of that same iridescent light we saw in the clearing were shooting down, striking the earth at random points. Is that the storm? Someone whispered nearby. No, I said, my voice lost in the rising wind. That's the door. Gallo grabbed my arm. We need to get you to safety. If Abernathy is right, if you really are the witness this thing remembers, then you're a target. Target? I pulled away. I'm a 70-year-old man with bad knees. What does a cosmic horror want with me? Completion, Shaw said grimly. Whatever ritual started in 1973, maybe it wasn't finished. Maybe Lavra wasn't enough. As if punctuating her sentence, a bolt of violet lightning struck a transformer down the street. Sparks showered like fireworks, and the streetlights exploded in a chain reaction. Darkness fell over the town, save for the unearthly glow from above. And in that sudden shadow, I saw them. Silhouettes. standing at the edge of the crowd. Tall, spindly figures that looked like the drawing Abernathy had made. They weren't moving. They were just watching. And they were all looking at me. "Get in the car," Gallo yelled, shoving me toward their SUV. We peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. The radio was dead. Nothing but that rhythmic, grinding static. "Where are we going?" I shouted from the back seat. "The only place where we might get answers," Shaw replied, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We're going back to Abernathy's house." There was more in that safe. Maps, charts. He was tracking this thing for 50 years. Jack. He knew it was coming back. He didn't just know. I realized, a cold clarity washing over me. He invited it. We drove through the chaotic streets, dodging panicked pedestrians and stalled cars. Abernathy's estate was on the outskirts of town, a sprawling mansion that had always looked like a fortress. Now it looked like a tomb. The gates were open, twisted off their hinges as if something massive had pushed its way through. We pulled up to the main house. The front door was wide open. The lights inside were flickering. "Stay close," Gallo ordered, drawing his weapon. "And for God's sake, don't touch anything." We entered the grand foyer. It was a scene of madness. The walls were covered in writing. Thousands of lines of text, scrawled in black marker, covering the wallpaper, the mirrors, the family portraits. It was the same phrase, over and over again. "The witness must see. The witness must see. The witness must see." "I think he means you, Jack," Shaw whispered, shining her light on the wall. "What am I supposed to see?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The truth," a voice said from the top of the stairs. We all spun around, weapons and my flashlight trained on the landing. Standing there was a young man. He couldn't have been more than 20. He looked terrified, clutching a baseball bat like a lifeline. "Who are you?" Gallo barked. "I'm Davy," the kid said. "Davy Abernathy? Thomas is my grandfather." "Davy?" I repeated. The name hit me. Laura's last name. Abernathy named his grandson after the girl he murdered? "He told me you'd come," the kid said, walking down the stairs slowly. "He said when the sky turned purple, the witness would come to the house. He left something for you. Specifically for you, Mr. Caldwell." He held out a small, ornate wooden box. It looked old, carved from a wood that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. I recognized the grain. It was the same wood as the tree in the clearing. "Don't touch it," Shaw warned. "I have to," I said, stepping forward. I felt a pull, a magnetic attraction to the box. "It's part of the story." I took the box. It was warm to the touch. I opened the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was a pair of glasses. Old wire-rimmed spectacles. My glasses. The ones I had lost in the woods in 1973. The ones I told myself I had dropped while running from a stray dog. But the lenses were different. They weren't glass anymore. They were cut from a translucent violet stone. "Put them on," Davy whispered. "He said you need them to see the hidden world." I hesitated. The hum outside was deafening now. The house began to shake. "Jack, don't," Gallo said. But I knew I had to. I took off my own glasses and put on the ones from the box. The world didn't change. It exploded. Suddenly, the walls of the house weren't solid. I could see through them. I could see the steel beams, the wiring, the pipes, but more than that, I could see between them. The air was filled with glowing geometric webs, lines of energy that connected everything: the house, the ground, the trees outside. And standing all around us, filling the room, filling the world, were the entities. Not just the spindly ones, but massive, towering shapes that drifted through the ceiling like smoke. They were everywhere. They had always been everywhere. And looking directly at me, standing right in front of Agent Shaw, was Laura. But she wasn't the 17-year-old girl I remembered. She was made of light and wood, her eyes burning with a terrible, ancient knowledge. She opened her mouth, and the hum stopped. "Hello, Jack," she said. Her voice was clear, human, and utterly heartbreaking. "You're finally ready to remember." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, but it wasn't the room anymore. Through those violet lenses, I was standing in two places at once. I was in Abernathy's foyer in 2023, but I was also standing in the Blackwood clearing in 1973. The timelines were overlapping, bleeding into each other like watercolors in the rain. "Lavra?" My voice cracked. You're dead. Eth is a human word," she replied. Her form flickered, shifting between the girl I remembered and something else, something vast and incomprehensible. I became something else, something they needed. A bridge. They? I whispered, but I already knew. The towering shapes around us. The entities that filled the air like smoke. They weren't monsters. They weren't aliens in the Hollywood sense. They were architects, observers, engineers of reality itself. "Take off the glasses, Jack," Agent Gallo said urgently behind me. His voice sounded distant, muffled. "You're having a psychotic break. We need to get you medical attention." But I couldn't take them off. Not yet, because Lavra was reaching out her hand, her luminous, impossible hand, and I knew that if I took it, I would finally understand. "Don't," Shaw warned. "Mr. Caldwell, whatever you're seeing, it's not real. It's more real than anything you've ever seen," I said, and I took Laura's hand. The world exploded into memory. Suddenly, I was 21 again. It was August 15th, 1973. The air was thick with the smell of pine and honeysuckle. I was in my bed, yes, but I wasn't asleep. I was lying there, staring at the ceiling, when the hum began. It started low, a vibration in my chest that I mistook for thunder. But it didn't stop. It grew and grew. I got up. I walked to the window, and I saw the light. It wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from the woods, a pillar of violet radiance that shot up from the clearing like a beacon. I didn't think. I just ran. I grabbed my jacket, my flashlight, and I ran into the night. The woods were alive, not with animals, but with energy. The trees seemed to lean toward me, their branches reaching out like fingers. The air crackled with static. My flashlight flickered and died, but I didn't need it. The violet light was everywhere now, bathing the forest in an alien glow. When I reached the clearing, I saw them. Lavra was there, standing in the center of the stone circle. But she wasn't alone. Tommy Abernathy was there too, kneeling, his hands clasped like he was praying. And standing over both of them was the thing Laura had called the Whispering Man. It wasn't a man. It was a geometry made flesh. It had limbs that bent in directions that didn't exist, a body that seemed to fold in on itself. Its face was a void, a space where light went to die. And when it spoke, the sound didn't come from a mouth. It came from inside my skull. The exchange is agreed. The door opens. The witness records. "Jack!" Laura had screamed when she saw me. "Run! It's not what he said." "It's not. But before she could finish, Tommy lunged at her. He grabbed her, pulling her toward the tree, the ancient oak that stood at the edge of the circle. And the Whispering Man? It didn't stop him. It watched. It waited. "Tommy, what are you doing?" I shouted, running toward them. Tommy turned, his face twisted in terror and greed. "It promised me everything, Jack. Power, wealth, a life beyond this shithole town. All I had to do was give it one life. One. She's a person, you bastard." I tackled him, pulling Laura away. But the Whispering Man moved. It didn't walk. It was suddenly there, between us and the tree. The bargain is sealed. The vessel is chosen. The witness will carry the knowledge. I don't want your knowledge, I screamed. Let her go. But it was too late. The ground beneath the tree split open. Not like an earthquake. It peeled apart like skin. And from inside, roots thick, black, glistening roots shot out and wrapped around Laura's legs. She screamed. God, how she screamed. Tommy ran. He bolted into the woods like a coward, his sobs echoing through the trees. I tried to pull Laura free, but the roots were too strong. They dragged her toward the tree, and the bark opened. It yawned like a mouth, and the tree swallowed her whole. I fell to my knees, staring in horror. The whispering man bent down, its non-face inches from mine. You have seen. You will forget, but the memory will remain. Waiting. And then it touched my forehead, not with a hand, with something I couldn't see, and my mind exploded. The memory was ripped out of me like a page torn from a book. I collapsed. When I woke up, I was in my bed, sunlight streaming through the window. I had a splitting headache and a vague sense of dread. But I didn't remember the clearing. I didn't remember the light. I didn't remember Laura being swallowed by the tree. Until now. I gasped, pulling my hand away from the vision of Laura. I was back in Abernathy's house, swaying on my feet. Gallo caught me before I fell. Jack, what happened? You were just standing there, staring at nothing. I remembered, I said hoarsely. I was there. I saw it all. The whispering man, Tommy, the tree, it erased my memory. It made me forget, so I wouldn't talk. So the town wouldn't know. Shaw stared at me, her professional mask slipping. You're saying an entity altered your memory? That's not scientifically possible. Neither is a girl fused with a tree, I shot back. But here we are. Davy Abernathy stepped forward, his face pale. My grandfather wrote about it in his private journals. He said the whispering man called itself a curator. It said it was collecting specimens, preserving them. Laura wasn't killed. She was archived. Archived? Gallo repeated. Like a museum? Like a library, Davy corrected. Grandfather said the whispering man told him that Earth was part of a network, a collection of worlds being watched, studied, and every few decades it would come back to check its samples. And that's happening now, I said, looking at the violet lenses in my hands. The door is opening again. It's coming back. To collect more? Shaw asked. No, I said grimly, to finish what it started. Laura was the first sample, but she wasn't supposed to be alone. Tommy broke the bargain. He ran. He didn't give himself as the second half of the exchange. So the ritual was incomplete, and now it wants you, Gallo said, his face ashen. It doesn't want me, I corrected. It wants the witness, the one who saw, the one who carries the memory. I'm the missing piece. A tremendous crash shook the house. The front windows shattered inward, and the violet light poured in like a flood. The hum was deafening now, so loud it felt like my bones were vibrating. We need to go, Shaw shouted. Now! But as we turned to run, the doorway filled with light. And standing in the light, blocking our escape, were the silhouettes. The tall, spindly figures from the street. And they weren't just watching anymore. They were reaching. The silhouettes were inside the house. They didn't walk. They glided, their feet not quite touching the polished hardwood floors. Up close, they were even more terrifying. They weren't made of shadow, as I'd first thought. They were composed of a dense, vibrating static, like the dead channel on an old television set. And where their faces should have been, there were only smooth, black ovals that reflected our own terrified expressions back at us. Fire! Gallo screamed, and the deafening crack of his service weapon filled the foyer. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots, center mass on the leading entity. The bullets passed through it, as if it were smoke, burying themselves in the wall behind. The entity didn't flinch. It just kept coming, its long, spindly arms reaching out. "Bullets don't work on math, Agent," I yelled, grabbing Davy by the shoulder. "We need to move." We scrambled up the grand staircase, our boots slipping on the expensive runner. Below us, the entities swarmed the ground floor. One of them touched a heavy oak table. The wood instantly aged, rotting and crumbling into dust in seconds. "They're accelerating entropy," Davy gasped, his eyes wide. "That's what Grandfather wrote. They feed on time. They steal the future of whatever they touch." We burst into the master bedroom on the second floor. Shaw slammed the door and shoved a heavy dresser in front of it. It was a futile gesture against ghosts that could walk through walls, but it bought us a second of sanity. "Okay," Shaw panted, her hands shaking as she reloaded her useless gun. "Okay, rationality has left the building. Mr. Caldwell, you're the expert on whatever this is. What do we do?" "I'm not an expert," I snapped, clutching the violet glasses in my hand. "I'm a retired librarian who mows his lawn on Tuesdays. I just happened to be there when the world broke." "But you have the glasses," Davy said, pointing. "Grandfather said the witness would know the path." I looked down at the violet lenses. I didn't want to put them on again. The things I had seen, the layers of reality peeling back like dead skin, it was too much. But the hum outside was getting louder, a grinding mechanical shriek that threatened to shatter the windows. "Put them on, Jack," Gallo said, his voice grim. "We're dead anyway. Might as well see what's killing us." I took a breath that tasted of ozone and fear, and slid the glasses back onto my nose. The room vanished. Or rather, the surface of it did. The walls became transparent webs of energy, and through the floor I could see the entities drifting up the stairs. But I saw something else, too. A line, a bright, burning thread of gold that ran through the house, through the walls, and out into the night. It pulsed with a frantic rhythm, leading away from the mansion, toward the hills, toward the Blackwood. "There's a path," I whispered. "A golden line. It leads back to the woods. Back to the clearing?" Shaw asked, horrified. "Why would we go back there?" "Because that's where the door is," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "We can't run from this. The door is open. The only way to stop it is to close it from the other side." "You mean go into the tree?" Davy asked, his voice small. "I don't know," I admitted. "But the line goes there. And it's the only thing in this whole nightmare that looks safe. It looks like a lifeline." The bedroom door began to rot. The wood turned gray, then black, then disintegrated into ash. A skeletal hand made of static reached through the hole. "We don't have a choice," Gallo yelled. "Window! Now!" We smashed the window and climbed out onto the roof of the veranda. The wind was howling now, a gale-force storm that carried no rain, only dust and that terrible violet light. We slid down the drainpipe, tearing our clothes, scraping our skin, and hit the lawn running. We ran toward the SUV, but it was gone. In its place was a pile of rusted metal, tires disintegrated, glass turned to sand. The entities had touched it. "We walk," I said, adjusting the glasses. "Follow me. Stay on the line, I think it protects us." We ran into the night, a ragtag group of 4, 2 federal agents stripped of their authority, a scared kid with a baseball bat, and an old man wearing magic glasses. We followed the golden thread through the chaos of the town. It was a scene from hell. Houses were aging in seconds, collapsing into ruin. Cars were rusting into oblivion. People, God, the people. We saw a neighbor of mine, Mrs. Gable, standing on her porch. An entity touched her. She didn't scream. She just withered. In the blink of an eye, she went from 60 to 100, to a skeleton, to dust. "Don't look," I shouted to Davy, who was sobbing. Keep your eyes on my back. Don't look at them. We reached the edge of the woods. The Blackwood loomed ahead, a wall of darkness against the violet sky. The golden line shot straight into the trees, a laser beam cutting through the dark. It gets worse in there, I warned them. The reality is thinner. We might see things, hear things. Don't listen to the voices. Only listen to me. We entered the forest. The temperature dropped 40 degrees instantly. The trees here weren't just trees anymore. They were twisting, groaning shapes that seemed to be in pain. And the hum? It was a song now. A choir of 1,000 voices singing in a language that hurt my ears. Return, return, return. They're calling us, Shaw whispered, her teeth chattering. No, I said, squinting through the glasses. They're calling him. I pointed ahead. In the distance, illuminated by the violet pillar of light, was the clearing. And standing there, waiting for us, was the whispering man. But he wasn't alone this time. Tommy Abernathy was there, or what was left of him. He was on his knees, weeping, his hands clawing at the dirt. And rising from the split trunk of the oak tree, glowing with a terrible, beautiful light, was Laura. She looked at us. She smiled. And for the first time, I saw what she really was. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't a prisoner. She was the bait. Jack. Her voice echoed in my head, sweet and terrible. You brought them. Thank you. I stopped dead, the golden line fading beneath my feet. It wasn't a lifeline, I whispered, horror dawning on me. It was a leash. The whispering man turned its void face toward us. It raised a hand, and the trees behind us slammed shut, locking together like the bars of a cage. The collection is complete, the voice in my head boomed. 4 specimens, variety, excellent. We weren't there to stop it. We were the final delivery. Complete? Shaw's voice was barely a squeak, swallowed by the roaring wind. What do you mean, complete? We weren't following a lifeline, I said, my own voice sounding dead to my ears. We were following a loading ramp. It guided us here. It wanted us to bring the glasses back. The entity the whispering man drifted closer. Its presence was suffocating, like being underwater at the bottom of the ocean. The pressure wasn't physical. It was existential. You could feel your own insignificance pressing in on you from all sides. The witness remembers, the voice in my head intoned. The cycle closes, the archive expands. The split in the oak tree widened. It wasn't just a hollow anymore. It was a gateway. Through the gap, I could see. Stars, but not our stars. These were burning with cold, blue fire, arranging themselves in patterns that hurt to look at. And floating in that void were other specimens. I saw a man in Victorian clothing, frozen in a scream. I saw a soldier from the First World War, clutching a rifle that had turned to crystal. And I saw Laura, the real Laura, not the luminous projection standing above the tree. The real girl was inside, suspended in that amber void, her eyes wide open, forever 17, forever terrified. No, Davy sobbed, dropping his bat. Grandpa said we could stop it. He said we could close the door. Your grandfather was a liar, kid, I said, feeling a strange cold calm settle over me. Or maybe he just wanted company in hell. The luminous Laura, the avatar, extended a hand toward me. Come, Jack, it's peaceful. No pain, no age, just knowing. You'll see the history of the universe. You'll be part of the library. It was tempting. God help me, it was tempting. To stop being a tired old man with bad knees and a lonely house. To become eternal. But then I looked at Shaw, at Gallo, at Davy. They were frozen, paralyzed by the entity's influence. They were just livestock waiting to be processed. And if I refuse? I asked. The whispering man didn't move, but the air around us grew colder. Refusal is irrelevant. The exchange is mandatory. Exchange, I repeated. A life for a life. That was the original deal, right? Tommy traded Laura for power. But he cheated. He didn't give you the second life. Correct. The debt remains. So if the debt is paid, I said, taking a step forward, the door closes? Jack, what are you doing? Shaw managed to choke out, fighting the paralysis. I'm renegotiating, I said. I took off the violet glasses. The world snapped back to darkness, to the smell of ozone and rotting wood. I crushed the glasses in my hand. The glass sliced my palm, but the pain felt good. It felt real. I'm the witness. I shouted at the void-faced monster. I'm the one you want. I carry the memory. I'm the only one who knows the whole story. The entity paused. The hum lowered in pitch. The witness is valuable. The witness is unique. Exactly, I said, walking toward the tree. You want me? You can have me. But only me. Let them go. Close the door. End the cycle. The avatar of Laura looked down at me. Her expression shifted from serene to sad. You would do that, Jack? You would take my place? I should have done it 50 years ago, I said, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. I should have run into the woods that night. I should have saved you. The whispering man seemed to consider this. The trees around us groaned. A violet light pulsed. Accepted. 1 witness. For 3 released. The pressure lifted. Shaw, Gallo, and Davey collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Jack, no, Davey screamed. You can't. Get out of here, kid, I said, not looking back. Live your life. Don't be like your grandfather. Don't be like me. I stepped up to the split oak. The cold from the void washed over me. It smelled of old books and starlight. I looked at the frozen form of the real Lavra one last time. I'm coming, Lavra, I whispered. I stepped into the tree. Pain, that was the first thing. Cold, sharp pain as my body was unmade. I felt my skin turning to wood, my blood turning to sap. I felt my mind expanding, stretching until it covered light years. I saw the birth of stars. I saw the death of galaxies. But just as the darkness took me, just as I felt myself becoming part of the archive, I heard a sound. A gunshot. Not from Gallo's gun. Not from Shaw's. It came from the woods behind us. A loud, booming crack of a hunting rifle. The whispering man shrieked. A sound that shattered the remaining trees. I turned, half wood, half flesh, to look back. Standing at the edge of the clearing, smoking rifle in hand, was an old man. He looked like a skeleton wrapped in rags. His eyes were wild, maniacal. It was Tommy Abernathy. The real Tommy, not the husk the police had arrested. That was a decoy. A doppelganger created by the entity to lure us in. I told you. Tommy screamed, his voice raspy and broken. I told you I'd find a way to kill it. He raised the rifle again. But he wasn't aiming at the monster. He was aiming at the tree. He was aiming at me. If there's no witness, he cackled, there's no archive. The rifle's blast echoed through the woods like the scream of God himself. I felt the bullet tear through the air inches from my skull. Tommy wasn't aiming to kill me. He was aiming to destroy the tree, to shatter the archive. Stop him. Shaw screamed, scrambling for her weapon. But it was too late. Tommy fired again. This time, the bullet struck the trunk, not the wood, the gateway. The void inside the oak shuddered. The frozen specimens inside, the Victorian man, the soldier, Laura all, began to tremble. The whispering man shrieked. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, like your soul being ripped apart. The entity lunged toward Tommy with impossible speed, its long limbs stretching across the clearing. But Tommy just laughed. A broken, maniacal sound. I've been waiting 50 years for this. He howled. You took my life. You took my soul. Now I take yours. He pulled something from his coat. A grenade. An old military grenade, probably from the Korean War, rusted and leaking. He pulled the pin. "If I'm going to hell," Tommy whispered, his eyes meeting mine one last time, "I'm taking this bastard with me." He threw himself at the whispering man. The entity caught him, its static-filled hand closing around his throat. But Tommy was already gone. The grenade detonated. The explosion was blinding, not just light. Pure, white energy that tore through the fabric of reality itself. I felt myself being thrown backward, ripped from the tree's embrace. My body half wood, half flesh slammed into the ground. The whispering man screamed. Its form destabilized, flickering like a broken television signal. And the tree, the ancient oak, began to crack, not from the outside, from the inside. The archive was collapsing. "Jack!" It was Davey's voice, distant and terrified. "Get up! The whole place is coming down." I forced my eyes open. The world was spinning. The violet sky was collapsing inward, folding like paper being crumpled. The silhouettes, the entropy entities, were vanishing, dissolving into nothing. The hum was rising to a deafening pitch, then silence. The tree exploded. Not with fire, with light. A supernova of golden radiance that engulfed the clearing. I felt the wood in my body turning back to flesh. I felt the cold leaving my veins. And I saw them, the specimens. They were falling from the void. The Victorian man, the soldier, Laura. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All the people the whispering man had collected over centuries. They fell like rain, their bodies solid, real, alive. Laura hit the ground near me. She coughed, gasping, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. She looked exactly as she had the last time I saw her. 17. Terrified. Human. "Jack?" She whispered, her voice raw. What year is it?" 2023, I said, tears streaming down my face. "Laura, you're back." "You're really back." She looked at her hands, at the forest around us, at the FBI agents staring in shock. I was inside the light. I was everywhere and nowhere. I could see everything, Jack, the whole universe. And it was so lonely. The golden light faded. The void in the sky sealed itself shut with a sound like a door slamming. The trees stopped groaning. The wind died. And just like that, it was over. The clearing was quiet, normal, almost. Shaw was the first to move. She stumbled forward, her gun hanging limply at her side. What just happened?" "Tommy closed the door," I said, getting to my feet. My knees ached, but they were my knees again. Human knees. "He destroyed the archive. He destroyed the curator. Is it dead?" Gallo asked, looking around nervously. "I don't know," I admitted. "But it's gone. At least from here." Laura stood up slowly, looking at the ruins of the oak tree. The trunk was split into 1,000 pieces, smoldering with a faint golden light. "He saved me," she said quietly. "Tommy, after everything he did, he saved me." "He paid his debt," I said. 50 years late. But he paid it. The other specimens were waking up now, confused, terrified. Shaw immediately got on her radio, calling for backup, for ambulances, for anyone who could make sense of this. Davey just sat on the ground, staring at his hands. "It's over," he whispered. "It's really over." But I wasn't sure. I looked up at the sky. It was normal now, stars twinkling peacefully. But somewhere out there, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the reach of human understanding, I knew there were others. Other curators, other archives. We weren't alone in the universe. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Epilogue. 6 months later, the town of Blackwood rebuilt itself. The houses that had aged into dust were bulldozed. Insurance companies went bankrupt trying to explain the freak storm. The government classified everything, of course. Men in suits came and took statements. then made us sign papers promising never to speak of it again. Laura went back to her family, or what was left of it. Her mother had died in 1998. Her father was in a nursing home, his mind gone to Alzheimer's. She was a girl out of time, a ghost even flesh. They gave her a new identity, new documents. She's going to college now, studying astrophysics. She says she wants to understand what she saw inside the light. Agent Shaw and Agent Gallo were reassigned. I hear they're working on a special task force now. Something to do with anomalous phenomena. I don't envy them. Davy Abernathy inherited his grandfather's estate. He burned it to the ground. Good kid. As for me, I'm still here, still in my house, still watching the woods. Buster passed away last month. Old age. I buried him in the backyard under the oak tree, a normal oak tree. I think about Tommy sometimes, about his final act of redemption, about the fact that monsters can still do the right thing in the end. It doesn't erase what he did, but it means something, maybe. And at night, when the wind blows through the pines and I hear that faint, distant hum, I put on a pot of coffee and sit by the window, just watching, just waiting, because the whispering man is gone. But the whispers, they never really stop. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see that golden thread. It's faint now, barely visible, but it's there, leading somewhere, calling to something. The door is closed, for now, but doors can always be opened again. The end, ...